My girlfriend yelled, "Stop. You're smothering me," when I questioned her new iPhone lock. I murmured, "You're correct, I'll provide distance." The distance I provided her was so lasting that she had to clarify to her family why she was relocating back home at 30. I never saw it coming, honestly. For years together, and I thought I knew Chloe better than anyone. We were settled into our Friday night routine in my downtown Nashville loft, watching some thrillers she'd picked out on Netflix. I was sprawled on the leather couch I'd saved months to afford, and she was curled up beside me with that oversized throw blanket she'd claimed as hers within weeks of moving in. Everything felt normal, comfortable even. My phone had died around the second act, and I needed to check what time the late movie started at the theater down the street for tomorrow night's plans. "Hey babe, can I use your phone real quick to check showtimes?" I asked, reaching toward her iPhone on the coffee table. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. Chloe lunged forward, snatching the phone away like I tried to grab a live grenade. "What the hell, Dylan? Why do you need my phone?" The venom in her voice caught me completely off guard. I blinked, processing what just happened. "My phone's dead. I just wanted to check the movie times for tomorrow." She clutched the device against her chest, eyes darting between me and the screen. "Use your laptop. Or charge your phone. You don't need mine." That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The Face ID wasn't recognizing her. She was manually entering her passcode, which she'd never had to do before because her settings had been configured to recognize both our faces for the past 2 years. She changed it. Recently. "Chloe, did you change your Face ID settings?" The question came out calmer than I felt. Her face went completely red. "Are you seriously questioning me about my own phone? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're always monitoring me, always checking up on me, always trying to control everything I do." I sat back, genuinely confused. "I've never once looked through your phone in 4 years. I don't even know your passcode." "That's not the point. The point is you think you're entitled to access everything that's mine. My phone, my social media, probably my thoughts if you could figure out how." She was spiraling now, voice getting higher and more hysterical. "I can't breathe in this relationship anymore, Dylan. You're suffocating me with your need to know everything, control everything, possess everything." I stared at her, this woman I'd been planning to propose to next month, watching her create an argument about surveillance and control that existed only in her head. I asked to check movie times. "It's not about the movie times. It's about the principle. It's about you thinking you own me." She was on her feet now, pacing like a caged animal. "I need space. I need to think. I can't do this anymore." "What exactly can't you do anymore?" "This." She gestured wildly between us. "This constant interrogation. This assumption that I owe you access to every part of my life. I'm going to Madison's tonight. I need to figure out what I actually want without you hovering over me every second." Madison was her twin sister who lived across town in a studio apartment barely big enough for one person. Chloe had complained about the cramped space and broken air conditioning just last week. "If that's what you need," I said quietly, "then you should go." She stopped pacing, clearly expecting me to argue or beg her to stay. "That's it? You're not going to fight for us? You just told me I'm suffocating you and you need space to think. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for." Something flickered across her face then, something that looked almost like panic. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that stubborn defiance I was starting to recognize. "Fine. I'll text you when I'm ready to talk." She grabbed her overnight bag from the closet, throwing clothes in with unnecessary force. "Don't wait up." After she left, I sat in the sudden silence of my loft, staring at the paused Netflix screen. The whole fight felt surreal, like I'd been accused of crimes I didn't commit by someone who knew I was innocent. I'd never checked her phone, never questioned her whereabouts, never given her any reason to feel monitored or controlled. But her reaction to a simple request had been so extreme, so defensive, that it could only mean one thing. She was hiding something. Something big enough to make her blow up our entire relationship rather than risk me seeing it. I walked to my kitchen island where she'd left her laptop open, something she'd done 1,000 times before without thinking twice. The screen was still active, and I could see her text message notifications in the corner. Messages from Z, with heart emojis. My stomach clenched as I realized what I was looking at. Her evening yoga classes that had started 3 months ago. Classes that always seemed to run late, keeping her out until almost 10 p.m. Classes she could never quite describe in detail when I asked how they went. Classes that apparently involved someone named Z sending her messages with heart emojis at 11:30 on a Friday night. I didn't touch her laptop. I didn't need to. Everything I needed to know was right there in those notification previews, and the pieces of the past few months were clicking into place with devastating clarity. The new workout clothes she'd bought. The sudden interest in self-care and personal growth. The way she'd been guarding her phone like a state secret. The defensive anger that seemed to come out of nowhere whenever I showed normal boyfriend interest in her day. Chloe wasn't suffocating in our relationship. She was building an exit strategy while keeping me as her safety net. And tonight, when I'd accidentally gotten too close to discovering her secret, she'd chosen to burn everything down rather than face the truth. I poured myself a glass of the whiskey she'd bought me for my birthday, sat back down on the couch, and made a decision. If she wanted space, I'd give her more space than she ever imagined possible. I owned the converted warehouse loft outright, having purchased it with inheritance money from my grandfather before I'd even met Chloe. She'd never contributed to mortgage payments because there weren't any, and she'd never paid utilities, groceries, or any major expenses during our 4 years of cohabitation. What she had done was slowly take over every inch of my space like she belonged there permanently. Saturday morning arrived with unusual clarity. I woke up alone in my king-sized bed, no Chloe hogging the covers or complaining about my alarm going off too early. I made coffee in blessed silence, no one asking me to make it less strong or wondering why I didn't buy the expensive organic beans she preferred. That's when I decided to do something I'd been putting off for months: cleaning. Really cleaning. Starting with the stack of random papers and receipts Chloe always left on my kitchen counter. Most of it was junk, but buried in the pile I found restaurant receipts that made my blood run cold. Expensive dinners at places I'd never been to. Charges from that upscale steakhouse downtown, the one she'd mentioned wanting to try but I'd said was too pricey for a regular date night. Dates from the past 2 months when she'd claimed to be at yoga class or having dinner with Madison. One receipt was from just last Tuesday, when she'd texted me that she was working late on a project and would grab something quick on the way home. The receipt showed a $180 dinner for 2 at 8:30 p.m. I sat staring at the evidence of her lies, feeling something cold and decisive settle in my chest. But the final confirmation came when I went to close her laptop, which was still open from the night before. The text notifications were still visible, and now there were more of them. Messages from Z, asking if she was okay after leaving so suddenly last night, and hoping she could get away from him soon. I was the obstacle she needed to get away from. I closed the laptop and made 3 phone calls. First was to Anderson Security, the company that had installed my building's access system. I need to add biometric locks to my unit and remove authorized access for Chloe Mitchell, effective immediately. The technician could be there by noon. Second call was to my friend Marcus, who worked for a moving company. I need boxes, packing materials, and climate-controlled storage. How soon can you get here? He could swing by within the hour. Third call was to my lawyer buddy Tom. Hypothetically, if someone's been living in my property without paying rent or utilities, and I want them to leave, what's the legal process? His answer was simple. Since her name wasn't on any lease or deed, and she'd contributed nothing financially, I could ask her to leave anytime. I just had to give her reasonable notice and time to collect her belongings. I spent the next 4 hours methodically packing everything that belonged to Chloe. Her clothes, shoes, makeup, books, that collection of throw pillows she'd bought to make the place more homey. All of it went into boxes with careful labels. Nothing damaged, nothing missing, everything treated with the same respect I'd shown her for 4 years. The movers loaded it all into storage unit 847 in my building's basement level, A climate-controlled space that cost me $150 a month but was worth every penny for the peace of mind. By the time Anderson Security finished installing the new biometric system, my loft looked like a bachelor pad again. Clean lines, minimal furniture, no random stuff cluttering every surface. It was my space again, and the relief was overwhelming. I programmed the new locks to recognize only my fingerprint and face, then tested the system twice to make sure it worked perfectly. The old key cards were deactivated. The building's main entry system was updated to remove Chloe's access. She was effectively locked out of the entire building, not just my unit. At 6 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Hey, I'm ready to come home and talk. Madison's place is driving me crazy and I missed you." I waited 20 minutes before responding. "Your belongings are in storage unit 847, basement level. Access code is 4891, valid until Sunday at midnight. Building management has your new forwarding address for any mail." The phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail again. Then the text messages started flooding in. What the hell is this supposed to mean? "Dylan, answer your damn phone. This isn't funny. Open the door. I'm standing outside the building and my key isn't working." I turned my phone to silent and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Turned out, getting my life back was special enough. The building's front desk called around 8 p.m. to inform me that a very upset young woman was in the lobby demanding access to my unit, claiming she lived there. I authorized them to give her the storage unit information and nothing more. "She's becoming quite disruptive, Mr. Carson. Should we call security? If she doesn't leave within 15 minutes, yes. Call the police if necessary." She left. But the voicemails kept coming throughout the night, each one more desperate and angry than the last. By Sunday morning, I'd received 47 calls and 63 text messages ranging from fury to bargaining to threats to promises of change. I deleted them all without reading most of them. Sunday afternoon, she showed up at my building with Madison and two guys I didn't recognize, probably hoping the extra people would somehow intimidate building management into letting her up. The front desk called to inform me of the situation. "Tell them the storage unit access expires at midnight tonight, and after that, her belongings will be considered abandoned property subject to disposal." That got their attention. According to the desk clerk, Madison started screaming about tenant rights and illegal eviction until one of the guys with them pointed out that Chloe had just admitted she'd never paid rent or utilities. They left with a cart full of boxes, but I knew this wasn't over. Women like Chloe didn't give up easily when their comfortable lifestyle was threatened. And I was right. By Monday morning, the real war was about to begin. The first soldier in Chloe's army arrived at my office Tuesday afternoon. Madison, her twin sister, somehow convinced building security to let her into the lobby by claiming she had jewelry that belonged to their recently deceased grandmother and needed to return it to me urgently. The front desk called up and I almost laughed out loud. I'd attended their grandmother's 85th birthday party just last month, where the old woman had specifically complained about how Madison never visited and only called when she needed money. "Tell her I'll be right down," I said, curious to see what desperate lie she'd construct. Madison was pacing the marble lobby like a caged tiger, her designer handbag clutched tight enough to leave permanent finger marks. She looked like Chloe but with harder edges, the kind of woman who'd perfected the art of manipulation through years of practice on weaker men. "Dylan, thank God. I've been so worried about you both." She rushed toward me with fake concern plastered across her face. "This whole situation is just insane. Chloe is absolutely devastated." "I'm sure she is," I replied calmly. "About the grandmother's jewelry you mentioned?" Her composure cracked for just a second. "Oh, that. Yes, well, it's actually more complicated than I told security. Chloe has some family heirlooms in your apartment that belong to our grandmother, and with everything that's happened, she's afraid you might do something spiteful with them." I stared at her, genuinely impressed by the audacity. "Madison, I packed every single item that belonged to Chloe. If there were family heirlooms, they're in her storage boxes. But since I was at your grandmother's birthday party 4 weeks ago, I'm curious which heirlooms you're talking about." The color drained from her face. She'd forgotten I'd met their very much alive grandmother, had seen their modest family home, had witnessed firsthand that there were no mysterious heirloom jewelry collections floating around. Look, Dylan, you're being completely unreasonable about this whole thing. Relationships have problems. People work through them. You can't just throw away 4 years because of one fight. You're right. I can't throw away 4 years because of one fight. But I can end a relationship because I discovered my girlfriend has been cheating on me for months. Madison's mouth fell open. Clearly, Chloe hadn't shared that particular detail when she'd spun her victim narrative. That's not. Chloe would never. Restaurant receipts for dates I didn't go on, text messages from someone named Z, and a very interesting conversation about how she needs to get away from me soon. But I'm sure she mentioned all of that when she told you how unreasonable I was being. I watched Madison recalibrate her entire approach in real time. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by calculating coldness. Even if that were true, you still can't just lock someone out of their home without proper notice. There are laws about this kind of thing. You're absolutely right. Good thing this was never her home. Her name's not on the deed, she never paid mortgage, utilities, or contributed to any household expenses. Legally, she was a guest who overstayed her welcome. Before Madison could respond, my phone rang. It was Tom, my lawyer friend, with perfect timing. Hey Tom, I'm actually standing here with Chloe's sister Madison, and she's asking about tenant rights and proper eviction procedures. Could you clarify the legal situation for us? I put the phone on speaker. Tom's voice filled the lobby with professional authority. As we discussed, Dylan, since Miss Mitchell's name appears on no legal documents related to the property, she has no tenant rights to violate. You provided reasonable notice and time to collect belongings. Everything you did was completely legal. Madison looked like she'd been slapped with a legal textbook. But before she could leave, the lobby doors opened again, and in walked Chloe's parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell. I'd always gotten along well with them, which is why their presence caught me off guard. They were decent people who'd raised their daughters to be independent and responsible, though somehow that lesson had gotten lost on both twins. Dylan, honey, what in the world is going on? Linda rushed over with genuine maternal concern. Chloe called us crying, saying you'd thrown her out on the street over some misunderstanding about privacy. Robert, a retired construction foreman with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude, looked uncomfortable but determined. Son, I don't know what happened between you two, but Chloe's our daughter. We can't stand by and watch her be treated poorly. I felt genuinely bad for them. They'd been dragged into their daughter's mess without knowing the real story, and they were trying to do right by their child while maintaining their relationship with me. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I respect you both tremendously, and I hate that you've been put in this position. But I need you to know the whole truth. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots I'd taken of the text notifications from Chloe's laptop. Messages from Z talking about their future together, planning their relationship, discussing how she needed to get away from him, meaning me. I watched their faces change as they read the evidence of their daughter's affair. Linda's hand went to her mouth. Robert's jaw tightened in a way that reminded me of my own father's disappointment when I'd screwed up as a teenager. There's more, I continued, pulling up photos of the restaurant receipts. These are from places she told me she'd never been, dinners that happened when she claimed to be at yoga class. All charged to the credit card I pay off every month. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Linda was clearly trying not to cry. Robert was staring at the evidence with the expression of a man who'd just discovered his daughter wasn't who he thought she was. Dylan, Linda finally whispered, we had no idea. She told us you'd become controlling and possessive, that you'd thrown her out because she asked for basic privacy. She did ask for privacy, I said gently. Privacy to continue her affair without being discovered. Robert cleared his throat, his voice gruff with disappointment. Son, we owe you an apology. And we owe our daughter a serious conversation about honesty and consequences. That's when the lobby doors burst open again, and in walked the most unexpected person of all. Zach, the personal trainer himself, striding in like he owned the place with the kind of swagger that only comes from genuine delusion. "Where's Dylan Carson?" he announced to the lobby like he was serving a warrant. "We need to talk man to man." I turned to face him, taking in his perfectly styled hair, expensive workout clothes, and the kind of artificial confidence that crumbles under real pressure. "You must be Z." His bravado faltered for just a moment before he puffed his chest out again. "Yeah, I'm Zach. And I'm here to tell you to do the right thing and let Chloe come home. She's been through enough." The audacity was breathtaking. This guy had been sleeping with my girlfriend for months, helping her lie and cheat and plan her exit strategy, and now he was standing in my building's lobby demanding I facilitate their relationship. "The right thing," I repeated slowly. "You mean like respecting other people's relationships? Like not pursuing women who are already in committed partnerships? That kind of right thing?" I could see Robert's fists clenching at his sides as he realized this was the man his daughter had been cheating with. Madison was backing toward the door, clearly recognizing that the situation was about to get very ugly very quickly. "Look man, what Chloe and I have is real. What you two had was just comfortable, safe, boring. She needs someone who can match her energy, someone who understands what she really wants. And what she really wants is a personal trainer who works at Planet Fitness and drives a 2015 Honda Civic?" I'd done my homework after finding his social media profiles. Zach's face went red. "At least I don't try to control her every move. At least I give her the freedom to be herself. Freedom to lie, cheat, and use other people's money to fund your dates. Very liberating." That's when Robert stepped forward, and I realized the situation was about to escalate beyond verbal sparring. "You're the man who's been sleeping with my daughter while she was living with her boyfriend?" Robert's voice carried 30 years of construction site authority. Zach, suddenly realizing he was outnumbered and facing a very angry father, started backing toward the door. "This is between me and him. Family should stay out of it." "Family?" Linda's voice was sharp as broken glass. "You destroyed our daughter's family when you decided to pursue a woman in a committed relationship. You have some nerve showing up here making demands." But I held up a hand, stopping Robert from advancing further. "Actually, I want to hear what Zach has to say. What exactly did you think was going to happen here? That you'd march into my building and I'd just hand over my girlfriend and my home keys because you asked nicely?" Zach's confidence was evaporating rapidly, but he tried one more desperate play. "Chloe told me you were keeping her trapped financially. That she couldn't leave because she had nowhere to go. I'm offering her a real future, not just some sugar daddy arrangement." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Madison winced at how badly he just stepped in it. Linda was staring at him with the kind of maternal fury that could melt steel. Robert looked like he was physically restraining himself from violence. And I just laughed, genuinely amused by the complete reversal of reality he just presented. "Zach, let me ask you something. Where exactly is Chloe living right now while she builds this real future with you?" His silence was answer enough. "She's sleeping on her sister's couch because her boyfriend of 6 months won't let her move in with him. But somehow I'm the one keeping her trapped." I turned to Linda and Robert, who were watching their daughter's affair partner crumble in real time. "I think we all have our answer about why this happened and what it was really about." Zach left without another word, his exit significantly less dramatic than his entrance. Madison followed shortly after, mumbling something about needing to check on Chloe. That left me alone with Linda and Robert, two people I genuinely cared about who were now collateral damage in their daughter's chaos. "Dylan," Robert said finally, "I don't know how to apologize for what she put you through. Linda and I raised her better than this." "You did raise her better," I replied honestly. "But at some point, people make their own choices. And Chloe chose to handle her problems in the worst possible way." Linda was crying now, tears of disappointment and embarrassment. "What happens now? Where does this leave everyone?" I thought about that question seriously. Where did this leave us? Chloe had lost her comfortable lifestyle and discovered her affair partner wasn't willing to provide the same level of support. Her family now knew the truth about her behavior. Her sister had been caught in multiple lies trying to help her. And I was standing in the lobby of my own building, finally free from a relationship that had been slowly poisoning my life for months. It leaves me with a clean slate, I said finally. And it leaves Chloe with the consequences of her choices. What she does with those consequences is up to her. But as Linda and Robert walked away, their shoulders slumped with disappointment, I knew this wasn't over. Chloe still had cards to play, and desperate people do desperate things when their comfortable world falls apart. When you corner a manipulator, they don't surrender quietly. They go nuclear. Chloe's nuclear option was social media, and she deployed it with the precision of someone who'd been planning this narrative for weeks. The Facebook post appeared on Thursday morning, tagged with every mutual friend we'd ever had and shared to 3 different Nashville community groups. I wouldn't have seen it if my coworker Jake hadn't forwarded it to me with a message. Dude, you need to see what your ex is saying about you. The post was a masterpiece of manipulation, complete with crying selfies and carefully crafted victim language. I need to share something difficult because I'm concerned for other women who might find themselves in similar situations. After 4 years together, I discovered that my boyfriend Dylan had been monitoring my every move, controlling my finances, and isolating me from friends and family. When I finally asked for basic privacy and independence, he became violent and threw me out of his apartment with no notice, keeping all of my belongings hostage until I agreed to his demands. I'm currently homeless and trying to rebuild my life after escaping what I now realize was an emotionally abusive relationship. Please be careful out there, ladies. Financial control is real, and it can happen to anyone. The post had 67 likes and 43 comments within an hour, mostly from people who didn't know me personally but were eager to support a woman in crisis. The comments ranged from generic supportive messages to specific offers of help, and several women sharing their own stories of abusive relationships. It was brilliant, really. She'd taken every element of our situation and flipped it into a narrative where I was the villain and she was the survivor. The financial support I'd provided became financial control. Her secrecy became my monitoring. Her affair became her escape from abuse. And the fact that I owned my own property became proof that I was keeping her trapped. What made it even more effective was the grain of truth in every lie. I did control the finances because I paid for everything. I did throw her out of my apartment because it was my apartment and she was cheating on me. I did keep her belongings initially because I needed time to pack them properly. But the context that turned reasonable actions into abuse was completely fabricated. The problem with Chloe's strategy was that she'd forgotten I had access to the same cloud storage she'd been using for years. She'd kept her laptop synced to my iCloud account after moving in, something we'd set up for convenience when sharing photos and documents. And that meant I could see every screenshot she'd taken, every draft she'd written, every piece of evidence she tried to manufacture for her victim story. The drafts folder was particularly illuminating. She'd written 17 different versions of that Facebook post, each one testing different levels of accusation and emotional manipulation. The screenshots folder showed she'd been capturing our text conversations for weeks, but editing them to remove context and make my responses seem unreasonable. She'd even taken photos of herself crying, apparently for future use in social media posts. But the most damaging evidence was in her message history with Madison and a group chat called Dylan Damage Control that included Madison, her friend Ashley, and someone named Brittany I'd never met. They'd been planning this character assassination for over a month, workshopping the best ways to make me look controlling and abusive while positioning Chloe as a victim. The messages were a masterclass in manipulative strategy. Make sure you mention financial abuse. That always gets people's attention. Don't say too much about the other guy. Keep it focused on Dylan being controlling. Remember to emphasize that you're homeless now. That will get sympathy donations. Get some photos of you looking scared and vulnerable. Save them for when you need maximum impact. The group had even discussed setting up a GoFundMe account for her escape and recovery, though apparently that plan had been shelved until they could gauge public response to the Facebook post. Reading through their strategic planning was like watching a war room plan a propaganda campaign, except the target was my reputation and the weapon was fabricated victimhood. I spent Thursday evening documenting everything. Screenshots of her drafts, evidence of the editing she'd done to our conversations, the group chat planning sessions, photos of the restaurant receipts and text messages that proved her affair. I organized it chronologically, creating a comprehensive timeline that showed exactly how she'd constructed her false narrative while covering up her actual behavior. By Friday morning, I had a decision to make. I could ignore the social media post, let her lies spread, and hope that people who knew me would see through the manipulation. Or I could respond with facts and evidence, potentially escalating the situation but setting the record straight. The decision was made for me when my boss called me into his office Friday afternoon. "Dylan, I need to ask you about something uncomfortable. There's been some chatter on social media about you, and HR wants to make sure we don't have any workplace issues." Someone had forwarded Chloe's post to my company's internal gossip network, and now my professional reputation was at stake. This wasn't just about friends and social circles anymore. This was about my career, my future, my ability to function in the professional community I'd spent years building. "I understand your concern," I told my boss. "And I have documentation that proves every single claim in that post is fabricated. Would you like to review it?" That evening, I crafted my own Facebook post. No crying selfies, no emotional manipulation, just facts presented clearly and calmly with comprehensive evidence attached. I normally wouldn't address personal matters publicly, but when false accusations threaten professional relationships, a response becomes necessary. Over the past week, my ex-girlfriend has been posting claims about our relationship that are completely fabricated. I'm sharing documentation that tells the actual story, restaurant receipts showing she was having an affair while claiming to attend yoga classes, text messages between her and her affair partner discussing their relationship, screenshots of her own drafts where she planned this false narrative, and evidence of a group chat where she and her friends strategized about how to make me appear abusive while covering up her infidelity. I supported her financially for 4 years while she contributed nothing to household expenses. When I discovered her affair, I gave her reasonable notice to collect her belongings and leave my property, which she never contributed to purchasing or maintaining. These are facts, not allegations, and I have documentation for every claim. I'm disappointed that someone I cared about chose to respond to being caught cheating by fabricating abuse allegations, but I won't allow lies to damage my reputation or career. I attached everything. The restaurant receipts with timestamps showing when she was supposed to be at yoga. Screenshots of her messages with Zach talking about their future together. Her drafted Facebook posts showing the deliberate construction of her victim narrative. The group chat messages revealing the strategic planning behind her accusations. Most damaging of all, I included her own words from the group chat. "I need to make him look controlling so people won't focus on the cheating thing. If I can get everyone to see him as abusive, they won't care that I was seeing someone else." The response was immediate and devastating. For Chloe, within 2 hours, my post had been shared 47 times and received over 200 comments, most of them expressing shock at the level of manipulation I documented. People who had initially supported Chloe were now apologizing for jumping to conclusions. Several mutual friends commented with their own stories about red flags they'd noticed but hadn't mentioned. The most satisfying response came from her yoga instructor, who publicly confirmed that Chloe had stopped attending classes 3 months ago but had never canceled her membership. Zach apparently saw the post too, because by Saturday morning, Chloe was posting new updates about how her support system had abandoned her and she was completely alone in the world. The GoFundMe account that she'd finally launched raised $89 before being reported and shut down for fraudulent claims. Her narrative had completely collapsed, but instead of accepting responsibility, she was doubling down on victimhood and blaming everyone else for not believing her lies. The problem with burning bridges while standing on them is that eventually you run out of places to go. And Chloe was about to discover just how isolated someone becomes when their manipulation tactics stop working on everyone around them. But her next move would be the most desperate yet, and it would finally cross the line from manipulation into actual legal consequences. When someone's entire identity is built on manipulation and they suddenly find themselves without leverage, they don't evolve, they escalate. Chloe's escalation began the following Tuesday with what appeared to be an official legal document slipped under my apartment door. The envelope bore the logo of Davidson County Process Services, and contained what looked like an eviction notice demanding I vacate my own property within 30 days to allow Chloe to return to her legal residence. I stared at the document, genuinely impressed by the effort she'd put into making it look official. Professional letterhead, legal language, even a fake case number. But there were problems with her forgery that any actual lawyer would spot immediately. The statute citations were wrong, the court formatting was off, and most importantly, you can't evict someone from property they own to make room for someone who's never held legal title. I called Tom immediately. Hey, I need you to look at something Chloe had served to me. She's claiming legal right to my apartment. Tom's laughter echoed through the phone when I read him the document. Dylan, this is completely fake. Laughably fake. The legal language is wrong. The court doesn't have jurisdiction over property ownership disputes like this, and half these statutes don't even exist. She's committed fraud by impersonating a legal service. That afternoon, Tom sent a cease and desist letter to Madison's address, where Chloe was apparently staying again. The letter was clear: any further fraudulent legal documents would result in criminal charges and civil liability. We also reported the fake process service company to the Secretary of State's office and the local bar association. But Chloe wasn't deterred by legal threats. If anything, they seemed to push her further over the edge. Wednesday evening, I was working late in my home office when my building's security called. Mr. Carson, there's a woman here claiming she's locked out of her apartment. She's hired a locksmith and they're asking for permission to access your unit. My blood ran cold. Absolutely not. That woman doesn't live here and has no legal right to access my property. If they attempt to break in, call the police immediately. I grabbed my keys and headed downstairs, arriving just as Chloe was arguing with both building security and a very confused-looking locksmith. She was in full performance mode, tears streaming down her face as she explained to anyone who would listen how her abusive ex-boyfriend had illegally locked her out of her own home. "Sir," the locksmith said when he saw me approaching, "this lady says you changed the locks to keep her out of her apartment. I need to see some documentation before I can proceed." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of my deed, utility bills in my name, and the building lease agreement. "This is my property. She's never been on any legal documents related to this apartment. She's trying to break into my home." The locksmith looked between us, clearly realizing he'd been lied to. "Ma'am, I can't help you break into someone else's property. This is a police matter, not a locksmith matter." That's when Chloe's mask completely slipped. The crying victim act disappeared, replaced by raw fury. "You don't understand. I lived here for 4 years. I have rights. He can't just steal my home because he's mad I found someone better." Security was already on the phone with police, but Chloe wasn't finished. She turned to the small crowd of residents who had gathered to watch the drama unfold. "This man is financially abusive. He's using his money and connections to make me homeless. Someone needs to stop him." One of my neighbors, Mrs. Chin from the floor above, stepped forward. "Young lady, I've lived here for 6 years. I've never seen your name on any mailbox, lease agreement, or building documentation. This man owns his apartment outright." The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who looked like they'd dealt with domestic disputes before and weren't impressed by Chloe's theatrical performance. Officer Martinez took my statement and reviewed my documentation while Officer Kim listened to Chloe's increasingly incoherent claims about abuse, theft, and conspiracy. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said after reviewing the evidence, "attempting to break into someone else's property is a crime, regardless of your personal relationship history. Mr. Carson has clear legal ownership of this unit, and you have no documentation supporting any claim to residence rights." "But I lived here. I have belongings there. You can't just let him steal my life." According to Mr. Carson's statement, he packed your belongings and provided them to you through building management. "Is that correct?" I nodded and provided the storage unit documentation showing she'd collected everything nearly 2 weeks ago. The officers exchanged looks that suggested they'd reached the same conclusion about Chloe's credibility that everyone else had. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted breaking and entering and for filing a false police report." The handcuffs went on while Chloe screamed about corruption, abuse, and injustice. The small crowd of neighbors watched in stunned silence as she was led away, still claiming that everyone was conspiring against her. Mrs. Chen shook her head sadly. That poor girl seems very disturbed. I hope she gets the help she needs. The arrest made everything real for Chloe's parents in a way that social media drama and family disputes hadn't. Linda called me the next morning, her voice heavy with exhaustion and embarrassment. Dylan, we just got a call from the police station. Chloe was arrested last night for trying to break into your building. I'm sorry you had to find out that way, Mrs. Mitchell. I know this is hard for your family. Hard doesn't begin to cover it. Linda's voice cracked. We raised her better than this. I don't know what happened to the daughter we thought we knew, but this person who's been lying and manipulating and now getting arrested, this isn't who we raised. She paused, gathering herself. Robert and I have been talking, and we've made a decision. We're not bailing her out this time. We're not enabling this behavior anymore. That conversation must have been devastating for Chloe, because the calls to me started immediately after she was released on her own recognizance the following day. 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails, and a flood of text messages that ranged from desperate apologies to threats to promises to make this right if I would just give her another chance to explain. I listened to exactly one voicemail, which was enough. Her voice was raw from crying, slurred from either exhaustion or substances, rambling incoherently about how everyone had abandoned her and I was the only one who could save her from losing everything. The irony was staggering. She destroyed our relationship through lies and cheating, tried to destroy my reputation through false accusations, attempted to steal my property through fraud and breaking and entering, and now she wanted me to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions. Tom advised me to save everything for potential evidence in civil proceedings, but to respond to none of it. She's spiraling, he said. People in her position either accept responsibility and start rebuilding, or they continue escalating until something forces them to stop. Unfortunately, it sounds like she's chosen escalation. He was right. The arrest should have been rock bottom, the moment when reality finally broke through her delusions and forced her to confront what she'd become. Instead, it seemed to convince her that everyone really was conspiring against her, that she was the victim of some elaborate plot rather than the architect of her own destruction. Her father Robert called me that weekend, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd watched his daughter throw away every opportunity for redemption. Son, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you gratitude. For what, Mr. Mitchell? For not enabling her the way we did. For holding her accountable when we were too afraid to. Linda and I spent years making excuses for Chloe's behavior, cleaning up her messes, protecting her from consequences. We thought we were being good parents, but we were creating this monster. His voice was heavy with regret. We've told her she needs to enter a residential program that deals with accountability and life skills, or she loses all family support. Financial, emotional, everything. We can't watch her destroy herself and everyone around her anymore. The ultimatum was harsh but necessary. Chloe had burned through every relationship, every support system, every bridge she'd ever built. Her affair partner had dumped her when he realized she brought nothing but drama and financial burden. Her friends had distanced themselves after seeing the evidence of her manipulation. Her family was finally setting boundaries after years of enabling. And I had moved on completely, building a life free from her chaos and manipulation. She was finally facing the reality that actions have consequences, and that victimhood only works as a strategy when people believe you're actually a victim. But knowing Chloe, I suspected she had one more desperate play left in her arsenal. And I was right. When someone has burned every bridge and exhausted every reasonable option, they don't suddenly develop self-awareness. They get creative with their desperation. Chloe's final act began with digital warfare that would have impressed a military cyber unit if it hadn't been so pathetically transparent. The fake Instagram accounts appeared first. Nashville_truth_teller, concerned_citizen_615, and abuse_survivor_anonymous all started following my friends, coworkers, and family members, then posting comments on their photos with links to articles about financial abuse and emotional manipulation. Each account used stock photos of different women and claimed to be someone who'd witnessed my pattern of controlling behavior firsthand. The accounts would comment things like, "I'm so sorry to see Dylan in your photos. Please be careful around him. He has a history of isolating women from their support systems." Or, "Just wanted to warn you that your friend Dylan was reported to police for domestic violence. Stay safe." The campaign was sophisticated enough to avoid immediate detection but sloppy enough that anyone who looked closely could see the coordination. All three accounts had been created within hours of each other, used similar language patterns, and mysteriously knew details about our relationship that only Chloe would know. But the real masterpiece was the crowdfunding campaign she launched on a platform that apparently didn't verify stories before allowing fundraising. Help Sarah Escape Domestic Violence featured photos of a woman who definitely wasn't Chloe, along with a heartbreaking story about fleeing an abusive relationship with a tech executive who had used his wealth and connections to trap her financially. The campaign claimed she was homeless, had no family support, and needed money for therapy, housing deposits, and basic necessities. The photos showed a brunette woman with obvious bruises that looked suspiciously like makeup, sitting in what appeared to be a shelter or transitional housing facility. The story was compelling enough that it raised $237 in the first week before I discovered it through a reverse image search that revealed the photos were stolen from a legitimate domestic violence survivor's blog from 3 years earlier. I reported the fraudulent campaign immediately, but not before screenshotting everything from my growing file of evidence. The platform removed it within 24 hours and banned the account, but Chloe had already moved on to her next strategy. She'd begun camping outside my building. Not obviously, not in a way that would immediately trigger trespassing charges, but strategically positioned at the coffee shop across the street where she had a clear view of the entrance. She'd sit there for hours with her laptop, occasionally approaching my neighbors when they entered or left the building. Mrs. Chen told me about the first encounter. That young woman stopped me yesterday and said she was a journalist writing about gentrification and displacement in downtown Nashville. She asked a lot of questions about you specifically, wanted to know about your lifestyle, your visitors, whether you seemed like the type of person who would use money to control people. The approach was clever. By framing herself as a reporter, she could ask invasive questions without seeming personally invested. But her cover was blown when she approached my building manager with the same story and asked for access to review my lease agreements and payment history for her article about affordable housing. My building manager, who'd dealt with her arrest and harassment campaign, immediately recognized her and called building security. That's when she abandoned subtlety completely. Thursday morning, I left for work to find her sleeping in her car directly across from the building entrance. She'd been there all night, surrounded by fast food containers and empty coffee cups, looking like someone who'd completely given up on maintaining appearances. When she saw me, she jumped out of the car and started following me down the street. "Dylan, please, just talk to me for 5 minutes. I know you hate me, but I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to go." I kept walking, but she kept pace, her voice getting more frantic. "Everyone's abandoned me. My parents won't help, Madison kicked me out, Zach won't even return my calls. You're the only person who might understand." I stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change, and she grabbed my arm. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm homeless, Dylan. I'm sleeping in my car. I haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days. I'm not asking you to take me back. Just please, please help me figure out how to survive this." For just a moment, looking at her hollow eyes and desperate expression, I felt something that might have been pity. 4 months ago, this woman had been living comfortably in my loft, eating meals I cooked, wearing clothes bought with money I earned, planning a future she intended to build with someone else while keeping me as her financial safety net. Now she was genuinely homeless, genuinely desperate, facing the reality of what life looked like without someone else paying her bills. But then I remembered the fake legal documents, the fraudulent crowdfunding, the systematic campaign to destroy my reputation and career. This wasn't someone who'd made mistakes and learned from them. This was someone who'd escalated her manipulation and lies until she'd burned every relationship in her life, and now wanted me to rescue her from consequences she'd created entirely through her own choices. "Chloe," I said quietly, You need professional help. And you need to stop harassing me and my neighbors. I pulled out my phone and called building security. This is Dylan Carson. The woman we've discussed is currently following me and won't leave me alone. Yes, I'd like someone to call the police. Her face went from desperate hope to pure rage in seconds. You're really going to have me arrested again? For asking for help? What kind of person are you? The kind of person who doesn't reward harassment and fraud with financial support. The police arrived within 10 minutes, the same Officer Martinez who'd arrested her for attempted breaking and entering. He looked tired when he saw Chloe, like he was dealing with a repeat customer he'd hoped not to see again. Ma'am, we've discussed this. You can't continue harassing Mr. Carson. This is stalking behavior, and you're violating the conditions of your release. I'm not stalking him. I'm trying to survive. He destroyed my life and now he won't even help me fix it. Officer Martinez looked at me with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact dynamic play out countless times. Mr. Carson, do you want to press charges for harassment and stalking? I looked at Chloe, sitting in the back of the police car, still claiming to be the victim of a situation she'd created entirely through her own actions. Still refusing to take responsibility for the lies, the cheating, the manipulation, the fraud, the false accusations, or any of the dozen other choices that had led her to this moment. Yes, I said. I want to press charges. As the police car drove away, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. 4 months, I'd been reacting to Chloe's actions, responding to her manipulations, defending myself against her accusations. But now, finally, I was done being reactive. I was taking control of the situation and setting consequences for behavior I wouldn't tolerate. That afternoon, I worked with Tom to file for a restraining order. The evidence file we'd built over the past weeks made the case straightforward. Harassment, stalking, fraud, false accusations, attempted breaking and entering, and a pattern of escalating behavior that showed clear intent to continue. The judge granted a temporary restraining order immediately and scheduled a hearing for the permanent order within 2 weeks. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. Chloe was finally facing real consequences that couldn't be manipulated away, and I was finally free to move forward with my life without constantly looking over my shoulder. But her response to the restraining order would be her most unhinged yet, and it would finally push her parents to take the drastic action they'd been threatening. When someone's worldview is built on the belief that they're always the victim, being held legally accountable doesn't inspire self-reflection. It inspires rage. Chloe's response to the restraining order was a final, desperate attempt to control a narrative that had completely escaped her grasp. The TikTok video appeared 2 days after she was served with the restraining order papers. I wouldn't have known about it if my cousin hadn't sent me the link with a message that just said, "Dude, is this your ex? This is insane." The video showed Chloe sitting in her car, makeup streaked down her face, crying into the camera with the kind of raw desperation that makes people stop scrolling. "I don't know what to do anymore," she sobbed. "I'm homeless because I asked for privacy in my relationship. I'm literally sleeping in my car because my ex-boyfriend used his money and connections to have me arrested for trying to get my belongings back." The performance was Oscar-worthy. Genuine tears, authentic desperation, the kind of vulnerability that makes people want to rescue someone. But then came the lies, delivered with such conviction that they almost seemed real. "He's been using fake evidence to make me look like a cheater and a manipulator. He has tech friends who helped him create fake text messages and social media posts to frame me. I never had an affair. I never lied to him. All I did was ask for basic human dignity and privacy." The video had been viewed over 40,000 times in the first 24 hours, with hundreds of comments from people offering support, money, and places to stay. Several women shared their own stories of abusive relationships, and multiple viewers started planning rescue missions to help her escape what they believed was an abusive situation. It was brilliant in its simplicity. She'd taken every piece of evidence against her and flipped it into proof of my technological manipulation. The restaurant receipts? Fake documents I'd created. The text messages with Zach? Fabricated by my tech friends. Her own drafted social media posts planning her victim narrative? Deep fakes designed to frame her. In her version of reality, I was some kind of criminal mastermind with unlimited resources and a network of conspirators, all dedicated to destroying one innocent woman who dared to ask for privacy. But the internet has a way of fact-checking that traditional media sometimes lacks. Within hours, digital forensics experts in the comments were pointing out inconsistencies in her story. People who knew both of us started posting screenshots of her original social media posts, the ones where she'd bragged about expensive dinners and tagged locations that matched the restaurant receipts perfectly. Her yoga instructor commented directly on the video, confirming that Chloe had stopped attending classes months ago despite claiming she'd been going regularly. Most damaging of all, someone had tracked down the original domestic violence survivor whose photos Chloe had stolen for her fraudulent crowdfunding campaign. That woman made her own response video, calling out the theft of her story and explaining how harmful it was to actual abuse survivors when people fabricated claims for sympathy and money. The backlash was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Chloe's TikTok account was suspended for violating community guidelines around harassment and misinformation. Her story had been thoroughly debunked by internet sleuths who'd done more investigative work than most journalists. And most importantly for my peace of mind, the restraining order hearing was moved up to that Friday because the judge wanted to address what he called an escalating pattern of harassment through social media. I arrived at the courthouse Friday morning with Tom and a folder full of evidence that had grown considerably over the past week. Screenshots of the TikTok video, documentation of the fake Instagram accounts, records of the fraudulent crowdfunding campaign, and a comprehensive timeline of every lie, manipulation, and escalation attempt Chloe had made since our breakup. Chloe arrived with Madison and what appeared to be a court-appointed attorney who looked like he'd been briefed on the case about 5 minutes before walking into the courtroom. The hearing was supposed to last an hour. It took 20 minutes. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence with the kind of efficiency that comes from seeing similar cases multiple times. He looked at the restaurant receipts, the text messages, the social media evidence, and the documentation of her escalating behavior. Then he looked at Chloe's recent TikTok video and the fraudulent crowdfunding campaign. "Miss Mitchell," he said finally, "I've reviewed Mr. Carson's evidence, and I've also seen your recent social media activity. Do you have any evidence to support your claims that Mr. Carson fabricated the documentation he's presented today?" Her court-appointed attorney whispered something in her ear, but she ignored him. "Your Honor, he has friends in tech who can make anything look real. The text messages, the receipts, all of it is fake. I never had an affair. I never tried to manipulate anyone. I'm the victim here." Judge Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his tone suggested he'd heard enough. "Miss Mitchell, even if I were to accept your claim that Mr. Carson fabricated evidence of an affair, which seems unlikely given the volume and consistency of the documentation, you've admitted to creating false social media accounts, launching fraudulent fundraising campaigns, and using stolen photographs of actual domestic violence survivors to support false claims. These are not the actions of someone seeking legitimate relief from harassment." The permanent restraining order was granted immediately. 500 feet minimum distance, no direct or indirect contact through social media or third parties, and a warning that any further violations would result in jail time rather than just fines. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "Miss Mitchell, I'm also referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible prosecution of fraud charges related to your crowdfunding activities and identity theft. Using another person's photographs and story to solicit money under false pretenses is a felony in this state." Chloe's face went completely white. Her court-appointed attorney was frantically scribbling notes, probably realizing his client had just admitted to multiple crimes while under oath. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. As we left the courthouse, Tom shook his head with what looked like professional admiration. "Dylan, in 15 years of practice, I've never seen someone self-destruct that thoroughly in front of a judge. She literally confessed to fraud while trying to claim she was innocent of everything else." That evening, Linda called me. Her voice was different this time, not the exhausted disappointment I'd heard before, but something that sounded almost like relief. "Dylan, we watched that video she made. We saw what she said about you, about the situation, about all of it." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Robert and I spent 30 years raising that girl, and we don't recognize the person she's become. But more importantly, we finally understand that we can't save her from herself anymore. What does that mean, Mrs. Mitchell? It means we've made arrangements for her to enter a 90-day residential program in Arizona that specializes in accountability and life skills for people who've lost their way. It's not optional. Either she goes voluntarily, or she faces the felony charges and everything else completely alone. The program was harsh but necessary. Residential facility, no internet access, no social media, mandatory therapy focused on personal responsibility rather than victimhood narratives. The kind of place that specialized in breaking down manipulative behavior patterns and rebuilding them with accountability and genuine self-awareness. She leaves next week, Linda continued. I wanted you to know because she'll probably try to contact you before then. Some final desperate attempt to change the story or manipulate the situation. Please don't respond. She needs to face this without anyone to rescue her. I promised I wouldn't respond to any contact attempts, and I meant it. Over the weekend, my phone buzzed with dozens of messages from unknown numbers, all clearly Chloe using different phones or apps to get around the restraining order. The messages ranged from desperate apologies to threats to final attempts at manipulation. Dylan, I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know that I really did love you. I just got scared of how serious we were getting and made terrible choices. I hope someday you can understand that I was just young and stupid, not evil. You've destroyed my entire life over nothing. I hope you're proud of yourself. When I tell my story in Arizona, everyone will know what kind of person you really are. My parents are sending me away because of your lies. I'll be completely alone for 3 months because you couldn't handle that I found someone who made me happier than you ever did. I deleted them all without responding and forwarded the screenshots to Tom as additional evidence of restraining order violations. By Monday morning, my phone had gone silent. Chloe was gone, shipped off to Arizona to face 3 months of mandatory self-reflection and accountability training. For the first time in 8 months, my life was completely my own again. I could work late without worrying about missing calls or managing someone else's emotional crisis. I could make plans without calculating the cost of supporting another person's lifestyle. I could sleep peacefully without wondering what manipulation or crisis would greet me in the morning. The loft felt like home again, clean and organized and mine. I'd started dating again, nothing serious yet, but conversations with women who paid for their own coffee and had their own careers and interests. Women who viewed relationships as partnerships rather than financial support systems. 6 months later, I received a Christmas card from Linda and Robert. The front was a generic winter scene, but inside was a handwritten note that surprised me. Dylan, we wanted you to know that Chloe completed the program in Arizona. She's slowly starting to take responsibility for her actions, though she still has a long way to go. The counselors said she still blames other people for most of her problems, but it's progress that she's admitting she made any mistakes at all. We don't know if she'll ever become the person we hoped she could be, but we're grateful that someone finally held her accountable for her choices. Thank you for refusing to enable her the way we did for so many years. We hope you're building the life you deserve. I kept the card for exactly 1 day before throwing it away. Not out of anger, but out of complete indifference. Chloe's recovery or lack thereof wasn't my concern anymore. I'd moved on so completely that updates about her progress felt like news about a stranger I'd never met. My only regret was ignoring the red flags earlier, but even that felt more like a valuable lesson than a source of pain. I'd learned to recognize manipulation, to value genuine connection over convenient arrangement, and to understand the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to rescue them from the consequences of their own choices. The distance I'd given Chloe had been exactly what she needed, even if it wasn't what she'd wanted. And the life I'd built in that distance was exactly what I deserved.